hour. And the last 15 minutes is going to be discussion. And then we turn off the recording for the last half hour so that people who don't want to be recorded can speak if they want to, you know. But this is going to take a couple, 3 sessions, because it's so, it is such a symbolic tale. You know, it is very symbolic. And it's very strange too. But anyway, let's just get started on it. I'm just going to kind of read the fairy tale first, and then we'll get through this discussing the people in the fairy tale, the symbols in the fairy tale, and let's treat this as a dream. You know, when we're reading this, we want to just think this is our dream that we have. You know, okay. So anyway, there was a miller. Okay, you know what a miller is? A miller is someone who uses a water wheel to grind the grain. Before that, you had to you had to use people with a stone and go around, and it was very hard. So he's kind of a magician, you know, and he's in a lot of fairy tales. And anyway, the miller had fallen by degrees into great poverty until he had nothing left but his mill and a large apple tree. Okay. One day he was going into the forest to cut wood. An old man who he had never seen before stepped up to him and said, "Why do you trouble yourself with chopping wood? I would make you rich if you will promise me what stands behind your mill." The miller thought to himself it could be nothing but his apple tree, so he said yes and concluded the bargain. The other, however, laughed derisively and said, "After 3 years, I will come and fetch what belongs to me." As soon as the miller got home, his wife asked him the origin of the sudden flow of gold which was coming into the house. The miller told her that it was from a man he had met in the forest, to whom in return he had promised what stands behind the mill. For the miller said, "We can very well spare the great apple tree." "Ah, my husband," exclaimed his wife, "it is the evil spirit whom you have seen. He did not mean the apple tree, but our daughter, who is behind the mill sweeping the yard." The miller's daughter was a beautiful and pious maiden, and during all the years lived in fear of God. In respect of the unconscious and the wisdom of nature, really, someone who is close to that type of wisdom. When the day came for the evil one to fetch her, she washed herself quite clean and made a circle around herself with chalk so that he could not approach her. In a rage, the evil one said to the miller, "Take her away from all water, that she may not be able to wash herself, or else I'll have no power over her." The miller did so, for he was afraid. But the next morning, when the evil one came, the girl had wept on her hands so that they were quite clean. She drenched them with the feeling function. You know, they're covered with the feeling function. And he was baffled again and said in his anger to the miller, "Cut off both her hands, or else I cannot now obtain her." The miller was horrified and said, "How can I cut off the hands of my own child?" But the evil one pressed him, saying, "If you do not, you are mine, and I will take you yourself away." The miller told his daughter what the evil one said and asked her to help him in his trouble and to forgive him for the wickedness he was about to do to her. She replied, "Dear father, do with me what you will. I am your daughter." And her father cut her hands off. For the third time now the evil one came, but the maiden had let fall so many tears upon her arms that they were both quite clean. So the evil one was obliged to give her up, and after this lost all power over her. She saved herself through the feeling function. The miller now said to her, "I have received so much good through you, my daughter, that I will care for you most dearly all your life long. No, you won't. I cannot remain here. I will wander forth into the world where compassionate men will give me as much as I require. Then she had her arms bound behind her back, and at sunrise departed on her journey. In time, she arrived at a royal garden, and by the light of the moon, she saw a tree standing which bore most beautiful fruits. She could not enter, for there was water all around, but she was tormented by hunger. So she kneeled and prayed to God. All at once, an angel came down who made a passage through the water so that the ground was dry for her to pass over. So she went into the garden. She went into the garden, but the pears were all numbered. She stepped up and ate one to appease her hunger, but no more. The gardener perceived her do this, but because the angel stood by, he was afraid and thought the maiden was a spirit. The next morning, the king found that a pear, his numbered pears, was missing, and asked the gardener whither it had gone. And he replied, last night a spirit came who had no hands and ate the pear with her mouth. The king then asked, how did the spirit come through the water? And whither did it go after it had eaten the pear? The gardener answered, one clothed in a snow white garments came down from heaven and made a passage through the waters so that the spirit walked over on dry land. And because it must have been an angel, I was afraid and neither called out nor questioned. And as soon as the spirit had finished the fruit, she returned as she came. The king said, if it be as you say, I will this night watch with you. As it was dark, the king came into the garden, bringing with him a priest. At about midnight, the maiden crept out from under the bushes and again ate with her mouth a pear off the tree, whilst the angel clothed in white stood by her. Then the priest went towards her and said, art thou come from God or from earth? Art thou a spirit or a human being? And she replied, I am no spirit, but a poor maiden, deserted by all save God alone. The king said, if you are forsaken by all the world, yet will I not forsake you. And then he took her with him to his royal palace. Because she was so beautiful and pious, he loved her with all his heart, ordered silver hands to be made for her. Very interesting that the silver hands and the pears instead of apples. After a year had passed, the king was obliged to go to war and left the young queen to the care of his mother. Soon afterwards, a boy was born, and the old mother wrote a letter to her son containing the joyful news. Now, this next part is just strange. But the messenger rested and fell asleep on his way to the evil, and the evil one changed the letter for another, saying the queen had brought a changeling into the world. Now, that's an elf. It's an elf that looks like a baby. As soon as the king had read this letter, he was frightened and much troubled, but he wrote to his mother that she should take great care of the queen until his arrival. But the messenger again fell asleep, and the evil one put a letter in his pocket saying that the queen and her child should be killed. Who's doing this? You just wonder why. When the old mother received this letter, she was struck with horror and wrote another letter to the king, but he received no answer. Rather, the evil one placed another false letter for the mother into the messenger's pocket, saying that she should preserve the tongue and the eyes of the queen as a sign that she'd fulfilled the order. The old mother was sorely grieved to shed innocent blood, so she cut out the tongue and eyes of a calf and said to the queen, I cannot let you be killed as the king commands, but you must remain here no longer. Go forth with your child into the wide world and never return here again. Thus saying, she bound the child on the young queen's back, and the poor wife went away, weeping bitterly. Soon she entered a large forest, there fell upon her knees and prayed. The angel appeared and led her to a little cottage, over the door of which was a shield inscribed with the words, here may everyone live freely. Out of the house came a snow white maiden who said, "Welcome, Lady Queen," and led her in, and she was an angel sent to tend her and her child. In this cottage, the queen lived for 7 years, which is a mythological number of, it's a full period, and was well cared for. Through God's mercy to her on account of her piety, her hands grew back again as before. We'll find out later a different way the hands grew back, which was even more startling. Meanwhile, the king had come home again, and his father thought to see his wife and child, but the mother began to weep and said, "You wicked husband, why did you write me that I should put to death 2 innocent souls?" Showing him the 2 letters, which had been forged, she continued, "I have done as you commanded." She brought him the tokens, the 2 eyes and the tongue. The king wept so bitterly for his dear wife and son. The old mother, pitying him, said, "Be comforted, she lives. I caused a calf to be slain, from whom I took these tokens. But the child bound upon your wife's, put the child bound on your wife's back, and I bade them go forth into the wide world, where she promised never to return here, because you were so wrathful against her." "So far as the heaven is blue," exclaimed the king, "I will go, and neither will I eat nor drink until I have found again my dear wife and child, if they have not perished of hunger by this time." Thereupon the king set out, and for 7 long years sought his wife in every stony cleft and rocky cave, but found her not, and began to think she must have perished. But God sustained him, and at last came to the large forest and the little cottage, and out of the house came the white maiden, and leading him in, said, "Be welcome, great king, whence comest thou?" He replied, "For 7 long years have I sought everywhere for my wife and child, but I have not succeeded." Then the angel offered him food and drink, but he refused them both and lay down to sleep and covered his face with a napkin. Now the angel went into the chamber where sat the queen with her son, whom she called sorrowful, and which means feeling. It just has a thing to do. There's something that, and he said to her, "Come down with your child. Your husband is here." So she went to where he lay, and the napkin fell off his face. The queen said, "Sorrowful, pick up the napkin and cover your father's face." The child did as he was bid, and the king, who had in his slumber let the napkin fall from off his face again, and the boy became impatient and said, "Dear mother, how can I cover my father's face? I have learned the prayer, 'O Father, which art in heaven,' and you told me my father was in heaven. How can I talk to this wild man? He's not my father." As the king heard this, he raised himself up and asked the queen who she was. "I am your wife, and this is your son, Sorrowful." But when he saw her human hands, he said, "My wife had silver hands." "The merciful God," said the queen, "has caused my hands to grow again." And the angel, going into the chamber, brought out the silver hands. Now he perceived that they were certainly his dear wife and child, and kissed them gladly, saying, "A heavy stone is taken from my heart." After eating a meal together with the angel, they went into the king's mother, and their arrival caused great rejoicings everywhere. And the king and queen celebrated their marriage again and lived happily together until the end of their lives. Anyway, that is the fairy tale, and it is one which several places brings this. It really does have to do with feeling versus thinking. It was that's what it's going to come into, and the feminine versus the masculine, and but it's going to take us a couple periods to go through the whole thing. You can see how symbolic it is. It's just incredibly symbolic, and I don't know whether we can get all the images. I'm just going to say, I thought one other person came in. If anybody did, just put their email in the chat. We could send you the text. But anyway, we're going to just now, it's a dream. Let's just say you had this dream. and we're going to go through it like it's a dream. Okay, so we're going to just start. It's so long, we have to go through it. But first, we're going to talk about the miller. Now, the miller appears in a lot of fairy tales, and he's a very ambivalent figure. He's the only peasant who doesn't work. So, I mean, he just has a water wheel, and grinds the grain that the farmers and the peasants bring to him, and he's sort of this mercurious figure who has the trick of making water work for him, and the word mechane, where machine comes from, means a trick. That's the literal meaning of it. Now, there's many fables of rich millers, and he sits there and through the water trick puts up the price of grain. He's both the purchaser and the seller of flour and the purchaser of grain. And so he carries the projection of the devil and the power fiend. He has this idea of being power, the power of water. And yet he's both creative and clever. And he grinds the flour with the mandala, the water wheel. So he's using this mandala to create this trick. Now this comes up in what he does with his daughter too. The miller belongs to the family of Hermes Mercurius, and he has the mercurial quality of consciousness and cleverness, which can be used for good or evil. Now, in this tale, he's come to the end of his tether. He's a poor miller for some reason, and therefore he needs to sell something to the devil, or she says, "You devilish qualities very close." Now, though he acts innocently, he's in a moment of difficulty. Because of this moment of difficulty he's in, something within his realm falls into the devil's hands. Now, the devil, who's the devil? Let's talk about the devil for a second. I mean, the devil is what, this is what Edward Ediger says, that he is the archetype of the ego consciousness. He's the archetype of ego consciousness, which has no connection to the water of life, who lives in dry fire, just dry, completely dry. Now, his form was originally, when Faust and Mephistopheles go back to Greece to fetch Helen of Troy. They go back in time to fetch her. Mephistopheles felt very uncomfortable because there was no such thing as evil there. Evil, in Christianity, when it started, it started in the Piscean age. The first fish is vertical, and it was the one that linked. It was very necessarily in the evolution of consciousness, the evolution of the God image, that the level of consciousness went out to an extreme of spirit. Okay, to create great tension between it and the earth. Because the higher it went, the farther it was from the earth, the greater of the energy between the two poles of spirit and earth. Okay, that was what the first 1,000 years of Pisces was. But then there's the second fish, which is horizontal. Once you've achieved this level, you not only have achieved great spiritual achievement, but you've also achieved great clarity of consciousness. And now you can put that to work in economic thinking, in organization, in making technology, and all that other kind of stuff. And that is supposedly the age of the Antichrist, but what it really means of the anti-self, the organizing archetype of wholeness. Okay, so it's the age of the anti-whole. It's the age of the when they enshrined reason at Notre Dame, in the French Revolution, and killed all the priests. I mean, the idea there was that ego consciousness had become its own God. So really, in the first half of the 1,000 years, the form of the devil was the same form as Pan, the god Pan, who represented the son of the mother, one who's very related to instinctual life with hooves and horns, and but he's a Dionysian figure. He's not an evil figure. He's one that's closely related. But so the idea of being in the body was evil. Okay. Now in the second half of Pisces, it's not so much being in the body is evil. It's the evil has now constellated around the ego being its own God, turning and turning in a widening gyre. The falcon can't hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy has come upon the world. I mean, it is the age of where the ego is the God. Okay. Now, anyway, so when we're talking about the devil, we're really talking about self-willed, ego, intellectual, thinking function, consciousness. That's what we're talking about. So anyway, the idea is that something in his realm fell into the devil's hands, and it refers to the misuse of intellectual consciousness. And she says something very interesting here, which I thought was a misquote. Okay, it said, by the ethical abuse of unethical capacities. Now I thought, wait, that can't be right. It must be the unethical abuse of ethical capacities. But she said in the sentence before, he acts innocently. So it's the ethical abuse of unethical capacities. So what's the ethical abuse of unethical capacities? It would be, to me, it would be like, here's one description of it. I mean, essentially here, the miller was using, instead of working hard and finding out what was wrong with him, why was he not doing well, and why was he at the end of the rope? What am I doing wrong? Hi, Azine. He turns to the cheap cure of magic, of black magic or white magic, or whatever magic it is. He's turning to the cheap cure. Now, this can also be, I know that I'm far from God, or I'm far from the wisdom of nature, and I have no meaning in my life. I have no reason to get up in the morning. Nothing to live for. I want to be close to that. Well, here, why don't you take a upper or a downer or a LSD or something? then you don't have to go through all this, agonizing over how you achieve it, and she's going to say this next time. I think we won't be able to get till next time, but she'll say it very eloquently. She describes a woman who sits on her bed and and just cries and says, "What do I have to live for?" But anyway, so he actually did. It was an ethical abuse of unethical capacity. He has a problem, so he is going to find a cheap way out. And so she talks about the cheap way out here, which is just in a very eloquent way. And she says, she's talking about in terms of the technology of our civilization. And, when we're talking about the technology of our civilization, you can also talk about the overuse of the thinking function in you, okay? So when we're talking about the overuse of technology in civilization, or the use of technology in civilization, just translate the overuse of the thinking function in me, okay? Or the underuse of the feeling functions, another way to put it. So he gets out of this. Now he's in trouble, and he gets out of it by a conscious trick. And the conscious trick is going to be to sacrifice the emotional and feeling side, cut off its hands, sell it to the devil, so that he can solve a financial issue. He'll be financially better off by doing that, And so, and he says, we do the same things when we, as the miller, thinking we're sacrificing just a little bit of nature. We plan to build a power station in the Alps, thinking we'll only use a few trees and fields, but we don't sufficiently realize our own carelessness in regards to nature, also to the feeling function, eros, and the emotional side, and we are selling our souls to the devil. Okay, and where certain it is whereby our certain psychological capacities within us are lost. Okay, so we become very one-sided. We really become almost lost three sides: electric lights and cars and houses, but we miss. Here's what we miss. Here's what we lose. We miss the breathtaking moment of reality, the uncanny feeling of a dark, rainy night. Think about that. The uncanny feeling of a dark, rainy night. The beauty of a moonlit landscape. Just see it in your eye. The ever-changing aspect of nature in its natural surroundings. My father's cousin lives on a mountain in Norway overlooking a fjord. She's got this window that looks out on it. And I said to her, do you ever get tired of looking out at this scene? She says, it's never the same. It's never the same. Every day it's new. So we no longer have a share in the emotional experiences our ancestors had. That of 4 seasons, of spring and summer, the beauty of fall, the long darkness of winter, and then start over again, and sunrise, sunset, that long period of night where, there's a certain amount of danger, feeling of danger, and sitting around fires, starry night, Milky Way. This is what we lose. Is that so much to ask? We can spare that. Can we spare that? Can we spare the apple tree? She says. So anyway, she says that this emotional experience of it's been part of us since man first came into being. You know, like take an animal caged. Yeah, you know, it's wonderful to watch cattle who have been in the barn all winter let out into the field in the spring and watching them. You know, they're back in the landscape which formed them over millions of years, and they know it. They don't belong in barns. You know, they know that too. You know, and so you know the full moon, the whistling of the wind in the trees was Miles spoke of. Link us to instinct. Link us to instinct. Okay, you know, instinct is this. That's that energy that you feel inside of yourself that overwhelms you. You know, and the life of the unconscious past. The whole scale of emotions which enrich our lives and links us with our ancestry. That's what we've lost. You know? So industrial technology stole that from us. And we never notice that that's what we're losing unless we go back and pick up the threads. And so most people are conscious enough to be stirred by that loss. The loss, in this case, what he thought he was going to lose, the apple trees and the meadows. But what is still worse is linked up with the apple tree, which we would cut down, is also the life of psyche we destroy within ourselves. This overuse of extroversion, overuse of the thinking function, overuse of doing anything other than dropping down into the state that our ancestors were formed in, and where they were whole beings. These internal experiences which belong to a whole pattern of nature. And so now that was what she's talking about. We can spare the apple tree, okay? We can spare, and then, but he ends up it's not the apple tree. He didn't lose the apple tree. The symbol for the apple tree that he was willing to sacrifice is the ever renewing life force within him called the soul, the anima. That's what he sacrificed. He thought he was sacrificing the apple tree, but he was actually sacrificing his soul, his ever renewing life force. So the daughter represents the anima, that part of feeling and emotional life now sold to evil, sold to the thinking function, sold to fell into the devil's hands, but fell into self-willed ego's hands. And so now that this story can be read from you can always read it from the Miller standpoint, or what von Franz is really trying to do is read it from the daughter's standpoint. So from the feminine standpoint, this is a woman who, through a specific constellation of her father complex, has fallen into the greatest danger. What does it mean if the father sells his own daughter to the devil when he got in a tight spot? If someone gets into such a position, she says, it's either the two things could have happened. One is a collective catastrophe where an asocial attitude saves his own skin at the expense of others. I mean, this is I'm sure, Azine, you've experienced that in Iran, My relatives, when the Germans occupied Norway, that was a great, problem. Do you collaborate with the Nazis, or do you take a moral standpoint? It's a great a dilemma. And if individuals in the collective, if in the individual something is wrong internally, he should ask himself why he is in such a bad way. Why is it only he who suffers? That means you did something to make this happen. What have you done wrong? What laws of life or laws of nature have you ignored? And it looks like the intellectual qualities of the human mind have worn out. Now, this is not unusual. This is what happens when we use the thinking function too much. If consciousness is used too long without renewal, without introversion, without going to nature, without doing qigong, for one thing, it becomes stagnant, and then it's at its end. Consciousness needs regularity, but regularity and normalcy degenerates into loss of soul. The superior function eventually runs down through overuse. Everything we do becomes a habit. Everything we do becomes mechanical. It becomes a trick of the persona. And consciousness turns into a machine, and it's deadly bored. And it's the malady also of the overuse of the extroverted attitude. Anywhere where mental activity becomes a trick, it takes a devilish turn. Now, here's a very interesting thing. Now, it's the overuse of the extrovert function. He doesn't want to lose the extrovert function. If he suddenly becomes rich, he doesn't have to. Instead, he should face his own poverty, where he could discover apple trees within himself, where he could discover the renewal of life in himself. But no, he wishes to continue in the old way, so he sells the soul of his renewing life forces, his anima. He sacrifices them so that he can stay in the extroverted function. And it's the wrong decision, because he wants this regularity, but he should be flexible enough to able to see crises coming. And you don't do that by continually doing these dishonest, cheap tricks. And there are other possibilities of life. If he's run out on this one, a new one needs to come. That might be what his poverty is telling him, that something else needs to start. And what are the other possibilities of life?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sure, Annette.
I was just wondering, because I often have seen somehow that in drawings, something with no hands or no feet, or mostly no hands, often I heard that people actually link that to not knowing how to go about things, like not knowing how to become practical, not knowing how to do things, basically. And in that sense, it's a kind of innocence too, isn't it? Like this Miller is also innocent, isn't he? What do you think?
Yeah, well, if you have no hands, could you say that again, because it was so beautiful. I just want you to try to say it one more time.
Well, if I've often seen when you have people who draw no hands, like they make figures without hands, or
a figure without hands.
Yes, or or feet, but usually no hands. And then often I've heard that often it was linked to a feeling of poverty in the deed, not knowing how to go about things, not knowing how to do things, you
Yes.
know, in the world.
Hands are
And
hard to draw. Yeah.
yes, also very
Yeah.
hard. But and then I thought, you know, has that to do with an innocence on the miller's behalf? Like, is he aware of his mistake? I'm just wondering, is he aware that he's selling stuff to the devil? Does he know that?
Well, I would say that it seemed okay until the devil gave him the choice. It's either you or your daughter.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And he says, yeah, I'm going to have to cut your hands off. So, I mean,
yeah. That's
the
right.
idea that was where his innocence suddenly became culpability in the fact. Now, remember, we want to be very fluid in our interpretations here, because the miller is not so much sacrificing his daughter as his emotional feeling side.
Yes.
His the potential for the renewal of life, the potential for new possibilities. No, I want to stay in Groundhog Day for the rest of my life. I don't want anything to change. Every day's got to be exactly the same. Otherwise, I'll get tense or something, you know. But
Yes.
yes, but there needs to be this constant. I mean, life is a becoming thing. And any symbol that
Yeah.
becomes too fixed is dead.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
need
That's true.
constant new symbols. Now, this was the beauty of indigenous peoples with no with an oral tradition, you know, because once you've written something down, it's frozen and it's dead, you know. And yet in the oral tradition, it is constantly evolving, just like the language evolves. You know, if you were to take a person uh, in the same locality and take them back 90 years, or say, I was saying 3 or 4 generations, they could hardly understand each other, because the language evolves along with the sense of the renewal of life. Now,
Yeah.
we live in such a weird place because, you know, now we live in these aspects of this mass civilization, you know, where before it was these groups of anywhere from 50 to 200 people. That's how our bodies were shaped. That's how our emotional and feeling side was shaped. The thinking function has sort of been, has evolved like Frankenstein, you know, all by itself. And these other sides of us have not evolved that much. Thinking, feeling, and intuition. They haven't just went off in this just overinflated imbalance. You
Yeah.
haven't, let's say we had the same thing happen in the feeling function that had happened with the thinking function over the last 1,000 years, you know, where the, this is something we'll open it up to everybody, Gary, as soon as I get done here with my little analogy. It's going to take us a while to get through this. I'll tell you, it's very symbolic, very important. I think the one thing I would say is the fairy tale is important, but we're also going to learn a lot about ourselves and about nature and about life and about our own orientation as we go through this exercise. Okay, that's the idea of doing young and not just reading young. I mean, that's the one thing you get out of these through real unconscious contents. We can deal with them on that level because they're not conceptual. They're very fluid. And the same energies that are in these are in us, you know. had one other question, and that you said something. I want to tell you, I had these dreams where I was up in space, and I don't need my feet anymore, so I amputate them and put them in a cryogenic freezer. I'm weightless. What do I need feet for? And
Yeah.
and this anima figure in the dream tells me, you know, those aren't that easy to put back on. You know,
Oh,
that's what she
yeah.
told me. But anyway,
Yes, because you have to create new routes again. It's a whole job, as you know.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I would say is this, is that I was just going to say, you know, people always talk about these, let's say, someone from another planet comes to Earth in their very advanced spaceship. You know, you're making two assumptions there. One is, or three probably. One is that there is life on other planets that thinks and has same grammatical capabilities or the same technological skills that we have evolved here. And one of them was traveling through space, you know, traveling. And the other thing is, the other assumption is that they came to Earth, you know, out of all the billions and billions of stars, they came here.
Yes.
Really? Okay. And you know, the third assumption is this: is, let's say there was on another planet the most absolutely advanced form of life there ever was. Now, first of all, I think the most advanced form of life in the universe is that one with hitting the return key with the little hearts flowing out of it. And that one lives in me, because that's the one that shaped my bodies. You know. Now, I would like to see any form of life on Earth that could shape our bodies, give us ears, eyes. Okay, well, you can talk to that one who did that every night. I mean, every day when you do an act of imagination, and they talk to you every night through your dreams. You know, but what I'm saying is, if there was a form of life in that was so advanced, why would it be logical, as Mr. Spock would say, that they would focus everything into the thinking function? What if they decided all to become Buddhas?
Yeah.
I mean, and like that, wouldn't that be the most advanced civilization in the world? You know. But anyway, we'll just open it up to questions and everything, as long as it lasts, and we don't have to stay till 12:30. But Gary, I'm going to just turn it over to you here now. But thank you, guys. And this might take 3 or 4 sessions. I'm sorry, but it's that rich.
You know, one of the things that really strikes me about the Miller is how disconnected he is. I mean, you know, his intuition doesn't warn him that, you know, that he needs to use some, you know, discrimination in dealing with this person there, this evil one. And then later on, the disconnect is still there, you know, when he gives up the daughter. But then the daughter is interesting because through her acceptance of any and all situations, you know, she never questions, like, is this fair? You know, her ego never comes into play. You know, you would think that there would be like some defensive actions, but there never are any defensive actions. And yet you know, because of her piousness, you know, she manages to take the high road at all times, and, you know, and regain the, you know, the losses, and to always stay connected. You know, and I think that's like, to me, the story is like, you know, one of extreme disconnection, and the other one is a story of extreme connectedness, extreme aliveness. You know, I just thought that was
Yeah,
really interesting.
It has several events which are horrible, but there also has several events which are have an incredible ability to, you know, do what the alchemist said, you know, is dissolve and coagulate. You know, they have the ability to melt hearts. You know, that's why I thought we might want to try the heart chakra today. Because
Oh yeah, good point. That was a great idea to do that one today. Yeah, you're right. I think that felt, you know, it fit very well. Tim, would you like to make a comment?
Yeah, I've always looked at this legend like Robert Johnson looks at it like the individual woman's journey. And now with this reading, I'm really seeing it as a cultural myth, because this is exactly what Western civilization has done with nature. You know, this oblivious deal with the devil. We are subjected to that personally, but I think the cultural sway is so strong that this becomes normalized. Well, you know, you're just going to have to make some sacrifices in order to get ahead, or whatever it is. And it's a really horrible thing. You know, making a deal with the devil is a horrible thing. And even in mainstream culture, we're just barely becoming aware that this is even something that we're subject to. So I'm just really touched with the whole thing.
all we're giving up is the moonlit night, the landscape in the moonlit night. You know, the uncanny feeling of the rainy day. I mean, it's just a horror. You know, I would say, you know, that speech of Chief Seattle, by the way, and let me just tell you a little bit about that, because it just is speaking in that tone. The people who attended that thing said that the later renditions of it were not profound enough for what he actually said. He didn't write. I mean, somebody tried to write it down. And if he didn't write it, who did? William Faulkner? John Keats? I mean, that's who I'm reading there. You know, I mean, there's some of the most beautiful prose in the world. But anyway, he talks about losing the body heat of the pony, and the you know, I mean, it goes through all the forest is full of talking wires, and the whispering on the morning mist, and you know, he just goes through. Now, all of these things too are just incredibly feeling, function, feminine, sensate, intuitive aspects of being alive. Okay, nothing about it that has to do with the thinking function. There's no words, there's no anything. You are, and she'll tell us later that that's pretty much the cure for depression. She thought was you go into that realm and you live there. And she says you can't. If you are living in the realm of nature, you can't exist that way, you know, if you really are. But keep going, Gary.
Yeah, Zen, would you like to make a comment?
Hey, everybody. So this week, as I started reading this tale, I was thinking, okay, at last, eventually, a complex that I don't have. But as I proceeded in reading, it was just my life, sentence by sentence. And it's interesting that talking about selling your soul or your daughter to evil, to devil, my father was not like that. He was, in a sense, I'm just giving a new interpretation of this. He was a very innocent person. So my mother, my sister, and I, we were always protecting him instead of him being protecting us. And I think he avoided life. He didn't take challenges. He was, the word that Gary used, disconnected. He was very disconnected from the reality. He leads a very boring life. Like, I remember when I was a little girl, in the morning, I was watching him eating his breakfast, and every day he would eat the same thing, and he was happy, quite content with it. And it drove me nuts that he didn't, I used to draw, and whenever he was taking a nap or something, I was there with my sketchbook and was drawing him. And all the time I was thinking, this person, my father, he doesn't have a dream. And it was the most scary thing to me. That's how you live a life with no dream, that you're completely satisfied with what you have. You've reached at the age of 40, you have your kids, you have your home, you're a professor, and that's it, nothing big. And when the revolution happened, everybody moved, everybody took the challenge, they immigrated, they fought. And when people with gun came to our house, storming to our house, it wasn't my father's fault. It happened to many families, but he was unable to protect me. You know, they took me away in front of his eyes, and he was just watching. He couldn't do anything. But the psychological effect happened. So and then my father didn't make a move because he knew French and he wasn't willing to learn English and to immigrate. So me and my sister and I, we came to the West on our own, and we went through a lot of hardships, a lot of unnecessary hardships. If our family was here, we wouldn't go through all this. So I definitely have this complex, and also with immigration, I think I also lost my feet and my roots. So what is left of me is just ahead, thinking. And I'm a very emotional person. Like, this is the first thing that people may notice, that I'm very sensitive. I'm artist type, but a while back, 2-3 years ago, I took a course in emotional literacy. Just I wanted to discover more and dig in. And then every day we had to report what was the feeling, 2-3 times a day. And I noticed that in my notebook, I was using 4 or 5 words. I'm sad, I'm happy, I'm excited, like 4 or 5 words. And then I realized why they call it emotional literacy, because you cannot go into the details of a feeling. So all these things, they have layers, and this Puritan attitude of this girl, that she's constantly trying to purify herself, like by tears and stuff. This is a very Artemis approach, and I see it in myself, sticking to principles. I'm a very moral person, and I defend principles. You know, all my life I lost a lot, I sacrificed a lot because I stick to the principle. And this is a kind of protection against life, because life is messy. Life is messy. You have to go into the mud and this stuff. But it's a really, really interesting myth for me. And I'm happy that we're going to work more on this fairy tale. I have to dig in. It's a really, really challenging myth for me.
Yeah,
And thank you. I want to thank Tim for finding me and bringing me to this space. It's really fascinating here, and I'm grateful for all of you.
Well, Zin, that was just absolutely moving. It's just, I mean, it is, I just thank you for sharing. I mean, I really think the emotional literacy side, we're only using 4 or 5 words. That's what, one thing Robert Johnson said when he went to India, which is his healing function universe. They have like the Eskimos have 400 words for snow, you know, they have 400 words for love.
Yeah.
You know, it's this emotional literacy. And this is one of the aspects of something I have to do too, is Marion Woodman says that we need to reflect every day. You know, what Hillman said, every day you need to write down in your journal, not what happened today, but what happened to the soul today. You know, what happened to my soul today, you know. And the idea of reflection is another aspect that is in that what you called emotional literacy, and what you were saying. I'm happy with that. But anyway,
Before we let go of Azine, I just want to put in a plug for her. I ran into her because she wrote this paper on the image of the centaur that I would love to discuss one time. And
yes,
she's just such a rich resource. I'm really glad that you're here. And
Thank you.
and you know, we've got a real heavy duty scholar here with us.
well, yes, I would like us to do your paper on the centaur here. So we've had you know, like what the difference between the centaur and the minotaur is. What's the difference? You know, that would love to hear that. And or just going to say, oh, the other thing was that my intention was that when we got through von Franz, which is going to take 2 or 3 episodes, that we go into Robert Johnson's.
Wow, that's great.
On
Thank you.
Let's really get at this one. And I'll send the text out. But I mean, the idea here is it isn't so much the tale, but the fact that the tale has so many different strands to it that it's going to touch things everywhere, you know.
Yeah, and there's capacity to dig in this group. Everybody is very open,
Yes.
and so why not? Why not?
Yes.
Yeah.
We've got
And
forever.
the last thing that I want to say is that there was one sentence in this fairy tale that really moved me, and it was it said that if you reach out to life, your hands will
Yes.
regrow.
Wasn't that beautiful? I sent that to Tim too, because he had a dream like that. That we'll get that. It's near the end, but he says she wants a drink of water. She leans
So
over.
beautiful.
The baby falls into the water, and she has no hand. She doesn't know what to do. This wise old man on the says pull her out, and she says, I don't have any hands. He says, pull her out, or pull him out. And so she reaches into the water, and living hands grow. Now, that's a little more powerful than what we read in this fairy tale of how eventually the hands came back through the
Yeah.
grace of God. No, they came out because he says, Paul, sorrowful out before he drowns, pull him out. And she had, and her living hands grow. But anyway, yes, that's that and about 4 or 5 other just unbelievable gems like that.
And I
Well,
also see a lot of I see it in my partner, the king, the son, and his kind of presence in my life right now, and the handkerchief and invisibility. It all has, everything has a meaning here.
Yeah,
It's
every
reflect-
single image. The king, who is the king? You know, I mean, we're going to go over that next time, but
Yeah,
the king is this aspect of is like the individual. The king and the individual. They represent only one aspect of the living psychic totality, you know, and so they always are the old king, you know, the one that needs to be replaced, because the one that's there is only one aspect of a living psychic totality that needs constant renewal, you know. So that was the name of the book by James Fraser, The Golden Bough. It was originally called The King Must Die. You know, in these civilizations, if the king was not very potent and ensured harvest every year, in other words, constant bounty and psychic energy, let's say. It can also be outer crops. But in the individual, if there is not if you are not producing fruit within you, the king in you must die, and the dreams will tell you that too. You know, something in you needs to die because the flow of life is not occurring. You know, and so that is the aspect of the king too, that he is an obstacle, not a catalyst for the renewal of the kingdom, the lifting of the curse and the curing of the enchantment or whatever is frozen the kingdom in time. Anyway, Gary, don't get me started.
Well, that was beautiful, Zim. You know, and one of the things that really strikes me too is that, you know, the work on emotional literacy is just so important because, you know, the more nuanced we are with being able to identify emotions, then, you know, we can work with the emotions, we can reflect, and then we can transfer that up to feelings, you know, because feelings are emotions that, you know, that we put a value to. And, you know, if you want, you know, to propose, you know, some sessions on working on emotional literacy, that'd be good. You know, that would, you know, that's something we could definitely do. And you know, I think that'd just be really valuable for everyone.
There was a period in the 18th century, or the late 17th and 18th century, and you can, and the early 19th century, and you can actually see it that every noun needed 3 adjectives. You couldn't just say it was a bear. You'd have to say it was a hungry, tired, old bear. You know, I mean, every noun needed 3 adjectives. And it got to be a little tedious because every time you put a noun in, you had to get the 3 adjectives for it.
Too funny. So, Miles, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, wow. I just wonder if, Craig, you know, you read a sentence and you thought, oh, that must not be ethical, but we need to change it to unethical. Could you go back to that and just read that again? Because I wonder if it isn't actually correctly written. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I am saying it is correctly written. I thought.
Oh,
for
okay.
a
Could you read it
second
again?
Yeah, sure. Okay. She says, though he acts innocently, in a moment of difficulty, something within his realm falls into the devil's hand. And this refers to the misuse of intellectual consciousness by, now here's what I couldn't figure out, by the ethical abuse of unethical capacity. And I said, that's not right. It should be the unethical abuse of ethical capacity. Well, that doesn't really make sense either. Well, I don't know. But the first part of it, it means I think she is right, or it is, I know it is right, because though he acts innocently. Now, what it means, the unethical abuse of the ethical abuse of unethical capacities. What it means to me is that you're taking the cheap way out. You know, you're not being dishonest, but you're not doing the heavy, hard work that's necessary to cure a situation. So let's say.
Yeah, he thought he was being ethical when he made that decision. Oh, I'm going to get gold coming in.
Yeah, all I got to do is
this
give
apple
up.
tree, you know.
Yeah, all I got to do is
sacrifice.
All I have to do is sacrifice that. We can share. We can spare the great apple tree. That's all I have to do. We can spare the forest and the fields. You know, it's not it's this ethical abuse of unethical capacity, sacrificing something else to save your own skin.
Well,
Actually,
and
there's also kind of a magnanimous component, because, you know, he can say very easily, well, you know, I'm not doing this for myself, I'm doing it to feed my family.
Yes.
And that's the excuse we hear all the time for this kind of thing.
Yeah, just keep going on and on. I mean, I guess here's one that I remember. Well, this was one that sort of Joseph Campbell thought was a little nuts. You know, the fact of the lunar module going to the moon, you know, and landing on the moon, and then taking pictures of the Earth with the moon horizon in front, an Earth rise on the moon. You know, I mean, this was in 1969. I think John Kennedy said that he wanted a man in the moon before the end of this decade. So in 7 years, I think from 62 to July 20th, 1969, they put a man on the moon without computers, by the way. It was all analog. Anyway, what he said about that is that some people would say, do you know how many ham sandwiches you could have made with the money that cost that thing to go to the moon? I mean, it's what, I don't know. It's just this, like you say, it's, I don't know. Here's like I used to clean up my room by putting all the mess on a big blanket. This is when I was a kid, and then putting the blanket in the closet. You know? So that was this ethical abuse of unethical capacities. You know? But anyway,
well,
yeah.
what I'd go on to say is that, like, I'm relating this to a situation that my city rushed into a purchase of real estate property without doing due diligence. You do not undertake a transaction of real estate without doing your due diligence. And that's a site assessment, environmental site assessment. It's just basic real estate, you know, today. And yet our city council just naively approved a deal and ended up with toxic waste. So now this Miller, he he didn't do his due diligence. He just rushed into it, just blinded by, oh, gold, and there's nothing but an apple tree out there. And when I talked about how when I was a boy living in Edmonton, and we moved from Edmonton to Calgary in 1970, so I was less than 10 years old, but old enough as an innocent child to go off exploring on my own and going, into the ravine and walking an animal trail through the autumn leaves and the golden aspen leaves, and just a magical moment. A friend of mine, and maybe all of you have these childhood experiences of just feeling like you're in a magical place in some spot in nature. A friend of mine, he has that type of experience that he remembers, and he was sitting in the tree. So the daughter was sitting in the apple tree in that innocence. And the miller, as you said, is one of our first capitalists. Now, I'm not against capitalism, because what is capitalism? It's just accounting. It's kappa means head, and capitalism is to count the heads of your cattle, for example, your livestock, in the stock market. So there's nothing wrong with capitalism, but it's unfettered capitalism, which can become so easily predatory capitalism. And the devil, that kind of capitalism is rife with deceit, like in a sense, unethical, because the devil knows there's more than just the tree back there. And that's so often what, capitalism is all about. Oh, I know a little bit of something you don't know, so I'm going to make a profit. Now it can devolve into some real ugliness. And when I recall that story of the ravine and the aspen trees in autumn, that was when I was in Edmonton, and Edmonton is the gateway to the Alberta tar sands. And what is the tar sands? Well, this is grinding the earth to try to separate oil from the sand. And so it's milling. It's just a very sophisticated milling. But some years ago, was in conversation with my member of the Alberta legislature, Rick McIver, and I said, I'm really concerned about these tar sands, because just what exactly is the situation up there? I don't want to be saddled with the environmental burden if it's not being done correctly. And he said, because what is the truth is what we're always trying to figure out. Who's telling the correct story? So, no, these oil companies are doing a great job in remediating. Well, yeah, they've got a little postage stamp remediated, but they actually went forward with extracting oil without having the technology to do the remediation. It's like, oh, we'll figure it out. We're smart people, this is back in the 1950s. They say, yeah, okay, well, there's lots of oil there, and we're smart people. We'll eventually figure this out. So they're kicking the can down the road. And so now, apparently, by government report, is like, this is a $250 billion burden on future generations that we've kicked down the road. So, anyway, so I just would summarize, I guess, to say that, men, I heard, we're more focused on things and concepts over women, compared to women who are more sensitive to relationship and aesthetics. And not surprisingly, the mother tells the miller, well, your daughter's back there. He just totally was blinded by the opportunity for a profit. Thank you.
Well, one thing I'll say in this is first of all of that, it could be true, but metaphorically, it can all be true inside us too. I mean, the idea here is the fluidity of these tales is that in me, there is a miller who is willing to sacrifice an apple tree. But then he finds out I'm willing to sacrifice a part of me. I'm going to lose a psychological possibility in myself that is not as important as my ego will and desire. I'm going to injure and lame myself in the emotional feeling side so that I can enrich myself financially or something, you know. And so I'm willing to lame myself through that. But then I find it's not the apple tree, it is my anima, it's my soul. The apple tree and the anima, or the daughter, are the same thing. That's what the message is that when he sacrifices the apple tree, no, he's sacrificing his own anima, his own daughter, is not his daughter, but it's what he's really sacrificing is the renewal of the life force within him. He is now soulless. You look in his eyes and there is nothing behind them. They're just panes of glass. And the living aspect of him is no longer there, you know. So he even though he supposedly, the devil says, you know, you can have, if I can't have her, I'll have you. It's the same either way. He'll either have him by him saying, yes, don't take my daughter, take me. That's what he should have said. Okay. But then he says, can you help me out of this spot? You know, but at the same time, when he does that, he did what he should have done, but he's doing it backhanded. When she goes, he's gone too. And she says, I cannot remain here. I am your soul. I am no longer, we're disconnected. I'm going on, you know. That is so if you were looking at it from the miller's standpoint and his anima decided to go away from him, what would that mean? I mean, that would be, say, Gary, like the anima making a group and not including us in it.
Very, Annette, would you like to say something?
Yeah, sorry, it also felt like I've heard before, but that you actually should never actually even negotiate with the devil because you will lose no matter what. If he had said, yes, take me instead of the daughter, the devil would have tricked him too, you know. I think that is somehow, I think you cannot make a deal with the devil. I think you look at him and move on or something. I don't know exactly myself, but that's how I feel about it. But what do you think?
I love it. I mean, no matter what you say to the devil, it's a trick. You know, you can always sacrifice, you can always say, it's either you or your daughter. Okay, take me. Then he would somehow get the daughter too. You know, I mean, there would be this has, I mean, look at when he comes in and starts changing the letters around, you know. I mean, he lost her because her feeling function covered her, even the stumps of her arms. And he said, and then he knew, oh, well, yeah, after the third time he came back, he says, well, now I know I cannot have her because her feeling function is too strong. Even if though they keep water away from her, I can't keep her tears away from her, you know, and so she's lost to me, you know. But then this trickster comes in. You know what Jung says, the fate is not devilish. Our fate, our destiny is not devilish. He says it's elfin. You know? It's full of tricks. That some are good, some are bad, some are neutral. You know, it is just this this unbelievable matrix of possibilities and chance, you know, I mean, and also it's synchronistic, okay? It's trying to teach us the lesson or something, I don't know. That is wonderful in that. I mean, didn't that it blew me out of the water because it's true.
You know, plus the whole comment on letters, it's almost like a parody because the devil, you know, there's always meanings behind the meanings and things are always getting twisted. So, you know, it was yet, you know, another parody on, you know, how he speaks. So, yeah. Jura, would you have anything to say? And you can give us the correct pronunciation too, in case we're getting it wrong.
Yeah, it's Jura,
Jura,
but
okay.
I understand. I understand the French one too.
Okay.
Probably not much to say. I was taken away by reading fairy tale restitution, so to say, well, modern fairy tale that just came out, a novella by Alex E. Harrow. I was reading it yesterday, and there was a lot of this, you know, the modern princess view of how what role parents play in her life, and how a woman protects her parents from hard truths.
Yeah, that you know what they told me to do is read a fairy tale every night before you go to bed, and you'll have better dreams. You know, because I mean, you sort of put yourself in that imaginal realm. But these ones that we're going to read here are all connected with the feminine energy. You know, now men have as much feminine energy as women do, except we're more unconscious of it. And we tend to think the masculine side is more valuable. So a lot of these fairy tales mean as much to us as they would to a woman, but as she'll go back and forth. If you look at it from the Miller standpoint, it's this. You look at it from the daughter's standpoint, it's that. You know, so we'll go there. And by the way, you're on the first Sunday of every month, we just have kind of a sharing session, and maybe if you could make that one, you could just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing and the inner work you're doing and stuff. It's unrecorded, and so all that is Angel. Did you want to have anything to say?
I know a lot of times, you know, she just wants to listen, but
yeah. Well, I'm glad to know that you're from Lancaster County. That's where all the Amish are from. And now that you live in Florida, which is where I would like to live someday. So. Anyway, well, thank you, everybody. We're going to get more deep into it next time. And like I said, we might spend a month on this one because of if we go through Robert Johnson too. But I think this one's worth it. And we're not going to get bogged down in the same old fairy tale. We're going to be learning about connecting with the depths in ourselves, you know. So anyway, well, thank you, everyone. Jura, lovely to have you here, and Miles and Annette and Azine and Tim and Angel and Dawn. I was here. So anyway, we'll see you all next time.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you, Azine.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.